Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing the challenges and providing tips for women in tech leadership. Hi, I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and in each episode, we'll hear from other successful women in tech, sharing their stories, insights, and advice. Join us as we empower each other to reach our full potential in the tech industry. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. And today we are going to talk about creating a culture of inclusion and diversity in tech leadership. And obviously, you know how passionate I am about this topic. And we're going to focus also on women because that's what we are here to empower women. Super excited to have Cara Shortsleeve here with me. And I'll do a quick intro before we start and dive in. Cara is the CEO at the Leadership Consortium, TLC. It is a leadership development platform designed to accelerate high potential and diverse leaders. Cara joined TLC in 2018 to launch and scale the business, which has since forged relationships with Google, IBM, HubSpot, Procter & Gamble, and many more companies. And prior to joining TLC, Cara spent more than a decade in various leadership roles at Google and YouTube. Most recently, she served as Global Director for Go-to-Market and Commercialization at YouTube, focusing on product and commercial strategy. So hi, Cara. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here today. I hope I didn't miss anything from your background. So if there's anything that I missed that you would like to highlight, please do.
I would say, let me see. You got the formal bio. So I would say the informal. I am also a working parent to the extent that is helpful to anybody in terms of how they are looking at opportunities in their workday. So I'm a working parent. I'm a lover of all things outdoors. So I'm a nature lover, an outdoor enthusiast. And that's what doesn't show up on the official bio.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the outdoors as well. Although it's steamy hot here right now in Israel. We're recording in August, which is like super hot and humid. Where are you based?
I am in the Boston area. So steamy, but not quite as steamy.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm actually going to the Boston area. We can talk about it later. I'm going on
Friday. Yes, welcome. We'll be glad to have you.
Yeah. So perhaps, Cara, we can start with you sharing a little bit about your background and your journey to become the CEO of the Leadership Consortium.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd love to share. As you covered in your intro, I had a lot of experience in tech as a sector. So I am a lover of technology. I love the application of technology. I love a lot of the premise of technology, which is, interesting way to solve problems in new and different ways. So loved my time in tech. As you mentioned, I had done about a decade at Google. In some of the things I loved most, I loved growing and scaling the business. As I said, I liked trying to solve problems in new ways. I became a huge lover of human capital. So I just loved the amount of difference that had been around us in a lot of the types of teams and organizations I was working on, and just seeing when teams are truly in flow, how powerful it is. So those were all things that I had sort of loved. And I was thinking about starting my own thing, which I had not done outside of the walls of Google. I had done that within Google, and that, as we know, is not quite a fair comparison. So I was excited to be outside the walls of Google to grow and launch a business. And my passion area around human capital was top of mind for me. And then I have a huge personal passion just around equity and representation and how to ensure, opportunity is as equally divided as the potential that is amongst all of us. So I had those ideas, reconnected with a professor. I had gone to Harvard Business School earlier in my career, and my co-founders of the business we run today, Frances Fry is a professor at Harvard Business School, and her wife, Ann Morris, who's an amazing author, we all reconnected and we were thinking about ways to follow all of our passions. And so we started this business in 2018, as you mentioned, and have been doing really fun, which we consider fun, important, hard, all the good things, work around accelerating more representative leaders. We did start in technology, as I think came through in probably a little bit of your intro. We now go across more sectors than that, but tech will always stay near and dear to my heart. And so it's where we started and where we know we still have much work to do.
Absolutely. And I'm with you on that. I share the same passion. I do it in different ways. Today I coach. And before we dive into how to do it, why is it important? And I mainly want to address that to anyone who is listening that is a leader, maybe not having so much diversity in the leadership. Why is it so critical to have diverse representation, especially in leadership and executive roles?
Yeah. I mean, I always say there's many reasons to do it, but if you want to start with business rationale, businesses are more successful. So your enterprise will be more successful if you are more representative throughout your ranks, but clearly through your leadership ranks. And that is often because many of the products and services we collectively offer across tech, but all these other great sectors, need to get into the hands of users or consumers who are very representative. And so as we think about how can we meet the needs of the markets out there, we obviously will be best served if we can be more representative of that difference all the way through the design, delivery, and iteration of the amazing products and services we all bring to market. So it's incredibly important from a business enterprise standpoint. It will also bring you great joy as a human when you think of the growth and development and acceleration you will get when you are exposed to difference. So there is a business reason to do it. There is a personal selfish reason to do it, which is you will grow and evolve as a human. And then, of course, I would believe there's a moral reason to do it, which is, as I said, we believe people's potential is evenly distributed, but access to opportunity is not. And so therefore, there's probably there's a pull on your heartstrings argument that this is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And I also share that as someone who led teams, and also I coach people. I just had a coaching session like in the past week of someone who hired a team that are all in the same kind of, I would say, experience level. And the team doesn't operate very well. A lot of, tension, competition. So when you have diverse, obviously we can touch about it, but diverse is more than just gender diversity. It goes so many ways. When you have diverse teams, everything just operates better. You get different opinions, sometimes heated discussions, but in general, you're more innovative, bring more ideas.
Definitely. I totally agree. In our business, we talk a lot about some of the whys on that. So I know you know this, but for the sake of the humans there's something called the common information effect, which is when humans get together, you are more likely to discuss the things where you have shared information or a shared experience than you are to delve into difference. And so the effect on teams is when you get a bunch of humans together, you risk they are going to come to the center and talk about only the experience they have, which are shared. The art in getting the benefit of diversity is creating an environment such that people can bring forth those different opinions and sort of resist the common information effect and start to celebrate how can we bring difference into the discussion, equation, et cetera. Obviously, to your point, with the end result being that you will get more creativity, you will get more innovation, you will get faster reps, like all the beautiful things we want to happen. We have to fight against the common information effect, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. It is probably how we evolved as a species to come together and hunt and gather. And yet, as we are evolving, we need to fight against that a little bit.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a little bit, less comfortable, right? I mean, it's harder.
For sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. And I think that is why there's a beauty to being able to share similarities. So there's a comfort in being same And then there's a natural discomfort in navigating difference. I think what we always try to think about, as I know you do a lot of coaching, so I'm sure there's a similarity in our approach in this way, which is how can you get comfortable with the uncomfortable? So like how can discomfort be an acceptable and embraced part of a team dynamic, a work experience, et cetera, such that the discomfort is in service of moving us to a, better solution or a better product or a better conversation, but acknowledging that it's okay that there is some discomfort with difference. That's part of the path through.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the Leadership Consortium and tell us a little bit about the work you do and how TLC is focused around creating solutions, conditions for diverse leaders to thrive. How do you do that?
Yep. So as a business, we do a few different things. We do work with organizations directly. So think of that as a more typical advisory capacity where we will come in and work within organizations really around the conditions within the organization, such that hopefully there's conditions for everyone to thrive. So there's certainly work we do in terms of operating context. So how can we help any given organization create a more equitable and higher likelihood of success context? So that's a piece of what we do. But we also spend a lot of our time working with leaders directly. And that is leaders who are, diverse in some way. And also we work with leaders from a traditional majority group. And both we feel like are a key to the solution in terms of how do we, on a sort of hand-to-hand combat way, how do leaders come in and create more inclusive cultures such that ripples down through the organization? So we work on the organizational side, but then we know how key it is for the leaders themselves to be setting the conditions within their pockets of the organization for those around them to thrive. So we sort of work on both sides, so to speak. When we work with individuals, we have some programmatic content. We have sort of surgical interventions in a good way, like with coaching and whatnot. So we have ways to assist the individuals and then ways we try to help, improve the system itself in terms of incorporating difference.
Absolutely. And can you share some, maybe some things that you see repeating themselves, both in the organization side and also on the leadership itself?
Yep. I would say that one of the things we see most consistently is an appetite to do better and an appetite to set inclusive cultures such, for the sake of business enterprise, for the sake of success. So the good news is we see an appetite really consistently. We also consistently see that some folks just don't quite know how to start. And so I think what we try to do as an organization is be your quote unquote just start block. So we come in and say, the worst thing you can do is just be slightly terrified of the problem. Like you can take a wrong step, you can take a right step. Probably doing either is going to ultimately get you on a faster path to where you want to be than the inertia of like, it's just overwhelming to me, or I just don't know what to do. So the good news is we get an opportunity to work with pretty forward-thinking companies who I would say are very far along the journey in terms of setting up really inclusive, empowering environments. But more often than not, when we sort of are helping a company through how to start with the problem, it's really the inertia that we're getting somebody through. In terms of consistent themes, we see, as I said, I feel really lucky with the roster of clients with whom we work. And so what I would say is we see most success, like sort of the consistent themes across these companies that are doing a pretty great job, is you never let the burden of diversity fall on the diverse. So like a diversity issue is not the responsibility of sort of the woman in the room to solve or the Black mother to solve. The burden of diversity should be held by the group, not the diverse human, however you qualify that human. And so what we see is the most successful companies are working to enable diverse humans and also sort of the majority group humans that, for better or worse, sit in the majority of the positions of power. So that's something we see consistently. And some of the best allies and advocates are those majority group humans who have and sort of an outsized impact on outcomes. and do an excellent job creating cultures for others to thrive.
That's great. And let's say I have a company, all male, white male at the top. I mean, this is what we see usually. And I see that all the time with, startups I'm working with. I mean, it's all men at the top. And let's say they are open and they want to change that. How do they start? What are like some first steps they can take to start kind of creating that inclusive culture?
Yeah, totally. I'm going to go even back further. The first thing I always say is the sooner you start in terms of getting diverse perspectives around your respective table, whatever that may be, the better, because as we know, the law of large numbers, the further you get and the more humans you have, the harder it is to change representation. So I would always say any of us who have the benefit of talking to companies who are pretty young in their life cycles, the guidance is build everything from day one with an eye around inclusive systems. And so that is, that's not just quote unquote hiring or who's sitting at it's all the system and processes we collectively have as we build a company. How can we think about sort of equity and equitable access within all of our systems, whether that's hiring, compensation, benefits, just as you think holistically, period. If you have gotten to a point where you do have a fabulous set of open-minded humans sitting around a table with the one challenge that they are all from, the same majority group, I would say biggest thing is, first start with education. So, hey, does everybody understand that things would be even more fabulous if we had more diversity in the system? So if there was more diverse points of view to help innovate, sounds like from your point of view, the answer would be yes, they want to be there. Mm-hmm. So then the two things I would always say is who do you have within your organization that you can fast track into positions of influence? So within, maybe it's not at that top tier, but as they look through succession planning, how can you fast track some internal talent who already has the benefit of understanding the operating environment and whatnot? So path to success might be higher than external hires. So how can you fast track the talent you have within the organization? And then, doing the hard work of ensuring as you're looking to bring more talent into the organization, what can you do to ensure difference is prioritized as it should be for business success? Those would be the two things I think we would coach on.
That's great. And how do you help underrepresented talent or diverse kind of groups to rise?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that, to be candid, that's why when Anne Francis and I were thinking about the business, there are so many worthy ways to help all of us do better with representation. Like it's a big industry as it should be, and people are playing in all parts of the funnel as they should be. When we thought about the problem, like me having grown up in tech, some of the experiences Anne and Francis had with the companies they advised, we came to a position where we wanted to take a bet on the fact that accelerating internal talent was going to be the fastest way for companies to do this well. So our bet was around how do you reach down to the organization and pull those humans up. So to answer your question, a lot of what we do is based on that premise that we think it's a fast way to change companies. And so, the ways we get about it, you have to be really disciplined with your succession planning. You have to be really disciplined with sort of strategically ensuring you are focused on growth and development, sponsorship, experience. There's different ways companies do it, but can you rotate people through seats to give people more experience than they might otherwise have if they were out in the external world? So there's all these avenues where we try to give internal candidates who look promising very specific boosts in terms of access to experience and development, such that they can grow more quickly and get into those positions of influence. So others below them can look up and say, okay, I see Cara there. There's a place for me here. Or I see Lamora doing this, and I associate with that, and I can see that someone like me can be successful.
That's wonderful. I have a question on that. How do you make sure that you don't create the opposite effect? So that people at the organization feel like, oh, if I'm a woman, for example, let's take gender diversity, oh, she got there because she's a woman and the company is interested in having more women in leadership roles, not because she's worthy.
Totally. Yeah. That's the art. I would say like that, I think, is the key challenge. What we try to coach our companies on, and I know this is hard, so go with me on the journey. What we try to do is say, get really smart on your data and figure out what is disadvantaging someone. Chances are that also might be disadvantaging somebody in the majority group. So as an example, you talk to your young mothers who are dropping like flies, not coming back from their maternity leaves, and you're trying to understand, why can't I retain like young mothers? I'm bleeding out this key demographic. Why? As you seek to understand what might be causing those humans to leave the business, you might say, oh, we have determined it's like sort of length of leave and benefits or something. Chances are, if you solve that for the younger working mothers, you probably also solve it for young working fathers, and you might solve it for, young parents writ large. So what the hope is, when you're looking at the data to understand why you are losing key groups of humans or why those humans aren't advancing, many times what would benefit them would actually benefit a majority group as well. It's sort of a wealth of riches, or whatever the analogy is, when you get to the point where it is not, where it's sort of, the pie is not getting bigger. A lot of the low-hanging fruit to do first with a lot of these organizations will actually sort of make the pie bigger for everybody. It's not, I'm trading off an opportunity for this human from this human. It's, if I can improve something, I'm actually going to empower more of my employees versus fewer of them. Same idea with, sometimes a lot of look at flexible work where you think it would benefit one stakeholder and actually others benefit a great deal and appreciate. So I would say we start with thinking with our companies about when you look at the sort of least successful humans, not because they don't have the potential, but because something in the system is getting in their way. When you look at what's getting in their way, many of the early changes are additive for all the humans. It doesn't just advantage the group that you originally were looking at the data set about.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. And I can personally relate to the example you gave. How was, by the way, if that's okay, me asking, how your personal journey kind of as a mom, as a working parent and a woman in a very, very male dominant field. I'm sure in Google and YouTube, there are a lot of, how is that impacted what you do today?
Yeah, so I will always say I feel very grateful for the experience I had at Google as a working parent. I think when I was having children, so, 2009, 10, 11, 12 or whatnot, I think Google was ahead of its time in terms of giving pretty healthy amounts of leave to mostly at the time, birth mothers, but it's since been expanded to adoptive parents and fathers as well. But to go back to my experience, I felt like I was given really nice, a benefit that really encouraged me to come back to work, in the way that if I had to make the decision at 4 weeks postpartum, how do I feel coming back to work? I probably would not have voted in Google's favor. Whereas when I got to make the choice 5 months postpartum, I could say, wow, I can see a way in which I can come back and be successful. So as an example, I felt very lucky with Google's setup that the way they structured benefits and things really did help retain me as a human in that business. What, of course, you can't get away from is I made a choice as a parent, like I made a choice to have children. And so therefore was just out of the mix for periods of time. So in my 11 years at Google, I had 3 maternity leaves. There is just a year plus of time that I did not spend, at my desk. That I would say that's a hard thing to get around. That's probably some personal choice. And I chose, hey, I want to have a family. And so that will be a year I'm not sitting at my desk doing my job. Do I think it hurt me in the long run? certainly not in the short run. Like, did I see opportunities come up that I might have thrown my hat in the ring for if I was sitting at my desk versus being on maternity leave? Possibly. And I think that's probably, for better or for worse, something on a human level. You have to decide, I am going to make some choices on when I'm going to be in and sort of with my work hat on, and when I'm going to pull out and sort of recharge as a human so that I can be prepared for the next opportunity.
Yeah,
So
thank you for sharing.
yeah. So I think personally, like, would do it the same way 100 times over. And yet you certainly, for me as a working mom, I certainly had moments where I would see opportunities sort of go by and wish, if I wasn't on leave or I wasn't doing this thing, would I have done that perhaps? And again, I could have put my hat in the ring. That was just sort of my personal choice, was to say, I'm going to take this time to get myself back in working order.
Absolutely. And I can relate to you as well. I have 4 children, but 3 maternity leaves because the last ones are twins.
Okay. Good for you. Wow. I'm always impressed with parents writ large, but parents of twins, it's like defies physics. I've just
I know,
not enough times or hands, in the day.
Yeah. And yes, sometimes we need to make some conscious decisions and prioritize. And I agree with you that for the long run, I didn't feel it hurt my career. Yeah. But yeah, when you look maybe at a specific time, maybe you feel, oh, okay, am I doing the right thing?
Or like you see somebody, like you see somebody get a promotion, and like, it can't help, every coach in the world will tell you, don't externally validate, look at your own path. And yet it's really hard as a human not to look at those people and say, like, I lost 6 months, off the starting block. So totally. I think the other thing that I don't know how I hope people talk about, but I think the other piece for me as a, this is my personal experience, but I know it is not unique. People focus a lot about, okay, what happens when you're sort of on maternity leave and not at the table. There's so much that happens, before that, where people are passing judgment, as you're sitting there clearly pregnant. Is somebody still bringing their A game? Are they going to come back? Should I invest in this? So like, I think we think about the moment when somebody's out on leave and what they might miss. And it really doesn't do justice to the humans that, you're looking at them, and it's a multi-year wrestling with that fabulous human. For me, when I look personally, you're going through miscarriages, then you're pregnant, then you're postpartum, and it's not like a 6-month thing, for which people sometimes see it as. It's a multi-year experience that people are really struggling with and trying to balance and trying to figure out, how do I succeed in this role, trying to start a family, and how do I succeed at work? So I don't make light of any of that. I think it's really hard. I know it was certainly really hard for me. And so I think the good news is, in the long run, as I said, and as you said, I'm glad I did all the things, but it certainly doesn't discount that it's hard along the way to experience that, as an awesome worker who wants to do great work and wants to succeed and wants to advance.
Absolutely. And yes, sometimes you have to take the hard path and do things you want to do, and not compromise. I didn't want to compromise on raising a family and advancing my career, and it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't want to reveal my own bias here, but like, if you want something done well, give it to like a really busy working mom, because they're going to figure out what has to be done. They're going to prioritize it. They're going to get it done, and they're going to keep going, because you don't have time to not do excellent work. So with all the challenges comes this amazing skill set of ridiculous prioritization. I think high BS monitor, and sorry, that might not just high monitor for things that are important and not important in life, because you start figuring out, with time as my most finite resource, I'm going to be really choiceful about what I give time to. And I feel like working parents, so not just moms, but working parents, are very good at prioritizing and figuring out how to do the most with each hour in any given day.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, part of what you mentioned is biases, basically, right? I mean, we all have different biases. And especially, a lot of biases around women in the workforce, when they're pregnant, when they are in maternity leave, and when they're back. But in general, there are a lot of biases.
Yeah.
How do you help organizations tackle biases? Because I can tell you that the unconscious bias training is not helping.
I know.
And I've done that.
Yeah. So interesting. So what I would first, let me admit where I am not an expert. So I am not, like, I do not have expertise around sort of unconscious bias and bias busting and all those things. So I am certain there are probably great programmatic approaches that, period. So let me just acknowledge that and say, I'm sure there are people doing hard and worthy work. What I would say is, like, to come back a step, I think a more like a generally applicable construct to offer to somebody is, how can you use curiosity and not judgment? So when you encounter difference, or when you encounter, like, when you yourself are feeling like, I think I just passed a judgment, either you're passing a judgment or you're seeing somebody pass a judgment. Our brains are not wired such that they can be in a moment of judgment and a moment of curiosity. So, like, the most basic but really powerful thing we talk to leaders about is, how do you get curious? So if somebody has passed a judgment, how do you get curious about, how do you ask them, how do you really engage in a way that allows them to debunk it or allows you to understand from where did they come? If you are going to move into a moment of judgment, how can you try to put on your own mental brakes and say, let me first be curious. Let me first seek other data, seek to understand. So that I know doesn't get it, like, bias busting specifically. Like you, I think I've taken many bias busting trainings and things like that. I don't know that personally I have found, the one that speaks to me most. But what I would say is, we all have them.
Yes, we do.
More aware, we know that. The more aware you can be, the better. And then as you see them manifest out in the world, how can you bring curiosity? Because at least that, like, systematically makes your brain chemicals stop from going into a judgment moment, which you might still get to the judgment after the fact, but at least it stops the chemical reaction and you have a moment to ingest, different and more data.
Loved it. Absolutely. And I'm with you on that. And we all have biases. All
100%.
of us. Yeah.
100%.
Wow. We can't believe how time flies. I would like, before we end,
we can jam all day, Lamar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fun. Thank you.
I do want before we end, if there's one piece of advice you would give. We talked about young mothers. So to the young mothers out there that aspire to become great leaders, what would it be?
The one piece of advice: everything's going to look better after 9 hours of sleep. That's it. If I can only give one, it's, don't worry, you will sleep through the night again. You will be so impressed with your ability to put more than 4 words together, and it's going to happen, and the world's going to open up for you. So that, if I can give one piece of advice, it's, don't worry, sleep will come back to you and you will operate again as a fully formed human. That's the one piece. The second piece would be, this is going to make you such a powerful human and executive, and taking on something new that you've never done, that you're in beginner mindset again, all the things that parenthood does to you as a human is going to serve you so well as an executive. But it's okay if you don't see it in this moment. Take a nap and maybe you'll see it later.
Yeah, take a nap for sure. Get help. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yes, get tons of help. And if you can afford to, pay for help. That is we at Google, I had an amazing mentor who always talked about sort of short costs and long costs. And if there's a way, to whatever way you are able, ask for help, whether that is by outsourcing or friends and family chipping in. It really does. It does take, you are not alone, and there are many humans who can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cara. It's been a pleasure. How can people contact you?
Yes, I would
reach out?
I'm like you. I'm here to be of service, so I can be of service in any which way, whether it's connecting people to one another, offering advice, anything like that. I always love to hear from people. Easiest way is probably via LinkedIn. I'm super active. Ping me a message there and tell me how I can be helpful. And I'm delighted to connect in and hear from you all and help. So that's probably the best and fastest way.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely put the links both for LinkedIn and for TLC.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Cara. It's been a pleasure having you today.
It was so fun to join. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader. This is your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and I want to encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Limor Bergman, and let me know. What do you think about the episodes? Feel free also to comment on Apple Podcasts and tell me, what do you want me to talk about? Which guests do you want me to bring? I really appreciate that, and have a wonderful day.